Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with veteran Kansas City Jazz guitarist Rod Fleeman. He is always a busy cat on the KC scene. Whether with Deborah Brown, Bram at the Majestic, or a part of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra, he developed a love for jazz while a freshman at Southwest High School growing up in Kansas City. And he would go on to attend the University of Utah and, respectively, the University of Miami. Over the years, he has performed with the best, like Marilyn Maye, which he currently does, Karrin Allyson, McShann, Claude Williams, and so many others. He's got great tales, and he is a Kansas City institution. Please, dig his stories, get to know him, and dig this interview, my friend.
Rod, thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So let me go ahead and start off here kind of at the top, and let me get an idea. You know, you're pretty active, and I saw you with the Deborah Brown Quintet the other night. You were with Bram at the Majestic the week before. The Kansas City Jazz Orchestra, there's always something going on. So give me kind of an encapsulated look at your Kansas City jazz activity in life.
You know, I guess my first professional jazz gig was with Greg Maye's trio. This is back when I was 19 years old, just finished a year of college, and wanted to get some experience playing, and just kind of the right place, right time. I met somebody another guitar player, and said, let's go down here to this group, really fine guitarist, Rod Fleeman, and he'd like to meet you, and great organ trio, Greg Maye. And so we went down, and I couldn't get in because, you know, they carded me. As a private club that was back in that time period, Kansas was pretty dry, but they did have private clubs, and the private clubs kind of became a popular thing because they were able to stay open until 3, and back in Kansas City, Missouri, that was unheard of. The clubs all closed at 1, so I went in, and then they just happened to be playing the break song, and the guy I was with said, I'll go bring Rod back to meet you, and then Rod came back and offered me the gig, well, as much as he could. It was his last night, and he was desperate to find somebody to recommend to Greg, who was kind of upset that he was leaving to start his own trio. And so the next thing I know, I was playing the next night, and it was 6 nights a week, and organ trio, 11 till 3 a.m. every night. And that really kind of helped, that really jump-started my career, because I was forced to, learn songs on the spot, and Greg is blind, so the first night I said, where is the music? He said, there's no music. So it was really a great, couldn't have been a better way to be thrown into the pool and sink or swim kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then from there, that's where I met Marilyn Maye, because a lot of performers that would be in town, when they would get off of work, they'd come over to the Wild Hawker. It became a real spot for musicians. So I met Milton Betty Abel there, and my teacher had such a great influence on me was John Elliott. Like so many people studied with John, and he'd come in with his trio when they got off work, and so I was able to, really play for the cream of the crop in Kansas City, and got me established and got me known, in a great way. From there, I eventually went to school at Miami, went to study jazz, and at the recommendation of Pat Metheny, and that was great. And came back and, found the Wild Hawker was long gone, and the organ trio thing, it kind of died out at that time. It's come back now, but at the time it was kind of on the skids, and everything was about electric piano, Fender Rhodes, and guitar was kind of like the odd man out. So I wound up playing bass for a couple of years, and I was quite busy playing with Gary Sibbles and Paul Smith at the Plaza 3, 6 nights a week. And on the off night, on Monday night, I played with Steve Miller and Julie Turner, once again on bass. So I was actually at the Plaza 3 7 nights a week. But I was on the wrong instrument. I wasn't on the instrument that I wanted to be on.
Yeah.
And from that, experience, I met a musician that came through town and sat in with us sometimes by the name of Charlie Vanichelli. When I told him I was really a guitar player, he made me promise to go sit in with a jam session and play my guitar. And it was these young guys that had been part of a band called Dry Jack, and they were backing up a saxophone player at the time named Bill Hemmons. And so, he made me promise, and I literally hadn't touched the guitar in like 6 months. I'd just been kind of depressed about it. So I went and sat in with him, and it was the perfect storm. I had no chops, and everything we played was fast, and it was either Giant Steps or La Fiesta or some standard I knew, but it's still like way fast, and so it was really, really horrible, and I made the wrong impression. But I got kind of angry and went home and started, really practicing hard. So I'm going to go back and show that I'm a lot better than what I did that day. And eventually, that next week rolled around and things went a lot better. And we reformed Dry Jack as a 4-piece band, and we started playing around Kansas City. Eventually, we got a record deal with Inner City Records in New York, and had a nice run. We had a couple of albums that came out, and we played New York City fairly often, and traveled some around the country. It was a hard sell. It was kind of a jazz rock fusion band, no vocals and all original music. So that's a tough sell. But eventually, my wife moved to Connecticut because I was living in New Paltz, New York, with the band, and so I moved in with her in Connecticut, and I'd commute for rehearsals, and then when we went on our little tours, eventually it was difficult because we had the option for a third record, which we recorded, but Inner City didn't pick up on it. Eventually, the label went bankrupt, and so I made the tough decision to leave the band. It was like leaving a brotherhood. It was just a difficult thing to do. But my wife Renee had been offered a job by the company she used to work for in Kansas City, and my grandmother was getting up there in years, and it just felt like the right thing to do was to come back to Kansas City, and so we moved back in like 1980 or 81, and my only stipulation in all this was I'm not going back to the bass. It's guitar, sink or swim. and I got I came back, and it was kind of tough because Dry Jack was a big deal in Kansas City. A lot of musicians felt like we had made the big time because we got on a record label, and it was kind of hard to just come back. You know what I mean? Sort of like from being in that position to sort of like going back to your it was hard. So I didn't tell anybody I was back for a while, and so I ran into Greg Whitfield at a flea market. So you're in town. What are you? You're just in town? I said, well, actually, I'm living here. So next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Steve Miller, local band contractor, big band leader, Then he called me up, and I said, well, Steve, I'd love to work with you, but I don't even own a bass, and I'm not going to play bass. It's guitar. And so he agreed to it. So I started working the country clubs and all that. And so the 80s were, just about country clubs and bar mitzvahs and shopping malls and spinach festivals. So Steve Karnas was still living in Kansas City, and we were good friends, and we started doing a few gigs together, and I was, like I say, I was spending most of my time in, one country club after another, and Steve called up and said, well, I've got us a steady gig. I said, well, that's incredible. That's great. Where is it? I said, Milton's, of course, legendary jazz club in Kansas City, the original one on Main Street. I said, well, that's great. And he said, it's a Monday night. Oh, that's perfect. I don't usually have anything on Monday night. So I just out of curiosity, I said, well, what does it pay? $5 a piece. I said, okay. That's basically some gas money.
Yeah.
And but at that point, I kind of thought to myself, the union part of me would say, oh, that's wrong. You don't go and play for nothing. But then the part of me said my artistic soul was at stake here, and I needed to get back to the love of playing. So we did. We had a nice run there, and that kind of changed my life because Steve eventually moved to San Francisco, but I kept playing the gig because Bob Bowman moved back to Kansas City, and so I kept playing at Milton's, even though Steve was gone. That was Bob Bowman, and then these things started falling into place. Like just playing with Bob was amazing because he's such a world-class bass player, and then Todd. Well, Danny moved back. Danny Embry, of course, I knew Danny. We were good friends, and our careers had intertwined because when I left Greg Mize, he took my place. So our careers always kind of intertwined. And so Danny moved back, and I thought, oh boy, Danny and Bob go way back, played together in California and L.A. And I thought, well, that's it for me, And it was Bob that got the idea to form the group Inner String with Todd Strait and Danny to have a 2-guitar band, and so that was incredible. We had a steady gig at a place called the Tuba on I believe Monday night or Tuesday night, and we started to get a following. And one night, I'd met Bill McLaughlin, the conductor of the Kansas City Symphony. He was a big jazz fan, and so he had gotten to know Karrin Allyson, who was living in Kansas City, had moved here and was performing a lot at the Phoenix. And so one night, he was kind of like a conduit for musicians because he knew all the players. And when she was trying to establish herself and start to work with people, he oftentimes would tell her who the players were, who to call. And so she had been using, I think, had worked with Danny and Brian Harmon, and Bill. It was Bill that said, well, you have to check out this Rod Fleeman. So she came into Milton's, we were playing, and asked me if I'd like to work with her. And I said, well, sure, I'd love to work with you. So that started the whole relationship there where I was playing, steady Tuesday night with Karrin at the Phoenix, and that led to recordings and then eventually tours around the world. And so all of a sudden the 90s were like my escape from the country clubs, which was just in time because the DJs had taken that stuff over anyway.
Yeah.
And so I started traveling with Karrin and, still playing with Inner String. And eventually I met Diane Shure through a tour I was doing with Karrin. It was sort of a diva tour where I was part of a backup band that backed up Olita Adams and Karrin and Sarah Gazarek and Beatles, Diane Shure. And at that time, Diane Shure was looking for a guitarist, so I wound up touring with her, Europe and Japan, and so I just all of a sudden I was a road warrior for a little bit because I'd do a tour with Karrin of Europe, come home and do the laundry, then go back to Europe with Diane Shure. Sometimes play the same places. Yeah, and that just kind of has continued to today. Just getting ready to go to. I've had a long association with Marilyn Maye, and going to New York with Marilyn in February to play at Dizzy's at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and such a thrill to be part of such a legendary performer. And she turns 90 on April 10th, and you never would dream it. The way she sings and performs is just phenomenal. So, and then Deborah Brown. I mean, I just feel like my career has been kind of linked to vocalists. I love that because it's just been something that I feel like I've worked with the best, Deborah Brown, Marilyn Maye, Karrin Allyson, Diane Schurer. It's just, I mean, it's been something else.
I'm going to fill in some holes in your story. There's a lot that you covered there, but I want to fill in some holes, and I want to ask you this. Growing up in Kansas City, talk to me about your childhood. What music did you hear in the beginning that really got you going and loving jazz?
Well, I'd have to say, early on, it was just like anybody else. I was just, I was listening to, my friend turned me on to WHB, which was playing the top 40, and of course I was, just the typical, loved the Beatles, grew up on all that stuff, and it was when I started playing in rock and roll bands, like when I was in I think like 7th grade, played in my first rock and roll band, and then good friend Chris Emily, we played together in that band, and eventually we found out that there was this guitar teacher that everybody wanted to study with, because Ed Toller was his name, and he was a white guy, but he probably where I was like maybe 13 or something, and Ed was maybe like 19. He wasn't super older than us, but he could play the blues, and he knew all the artists to listen to, and so I was studying with him, and that's when I guess that was the revelation, was to discover, through Ed, James Brown and B.B. King and artists like that, which, growing up in Kansas City in the mid-'60s, it was so divided, so racially divided, that, that was like another world to me, And so Ed was the one that turned me on. So I got my first B.B. King record, because I said, who should I listen to first, Ed? And get some B.B. King, And so I went to the local record store, Bernstein Appleby, and do you have any B.B. King? Never heard of him. This is before, he became, nationally known, by black and white, not just black audiences, but black and white. So I said to Ed, they don't have any B.B. King at Bernstein. You can't get any B.B. King there. You got to go to Foster's Record Salon. So my mom took me to Foster's, and it was like, wow, every B.B. King record you'd ever made up to that point, So that was my first introduction to that music that really turned me on. That got me really excited. I was over at Ed's house with Chris. We went over there, and we're looking through his record collection, and there's Albert Collins. Oh yeah, there's B.B. King. We knew all the names and all the people. Then, well, who's this guy? And he said, oh, he's great, but he's jazz. It was Wes Montgomery. It was my first introduction to Wes Montgomery, was through Ed Toller. And I was in high school. I signed up for the B band because my best friend, we didn't have any classes together, so he recommended that I try to con my way into the band as a drummer. I never took drum lessons. And that was really horrible. The beginning band, which is bad enough, and I was the worst one in the whole room. And it's just a happenstance, but it just to change my life was I'd been demoted from snare drum to bass drum, and then finally to hand cymbals. And I think I had one crash to make in the whole thing, and I blew it. My band director, great man, George Alter, said, "Fleeman, take those home and practice." Which got a big laugh out of everybody except me. And so I was walking out of the room, and just think about how life-changing this was. I was walking out of the room, dejected, and he said, I said, Mr. Alter, can't you find a place for a guitar in the marching band? He said, I've been studying on that. I'm much better on guitar. And he said, oh, I need a guitar in the marching band, like a hole in the head, with the eyebrow arching up, one eyebrow going up. And So I was leaving dejected, and he said, wait, what kind of guitar do you play? And I said, Gibson. No, what style? And even though I was a naive freshman, my mind immediately thought, why is he asking this? You know, if I tell him the truth that I'm a rock and roller, he's gonna say figures, and the eyebrows gonna go up. So I thought, what sounds hipper than rock? Jazz. I said, jazz. It just came out of my mouth like I was doing. And he said, well, stick around, you know, and I want you to hear something. So I sat down and, you know, gave up part of my lunch period, and these guys came in. They were mostly seniors, came in with their shiny horns, and they sit down, they start playing, and literally it was like a light bulb went on over my head, and I was like, oh my God, I've got to get into this band. It was almost like I've got to do this for the rest of my life. It almost had that sort of, you know, that whatever you call it, what's the word, revelation or whatever. I can't think of the right word, but you know, the problem was I had lied about being a jazz guitarist. So I listened to the band, you know, oh, this is great. This is incredible. And so, you know, they got done, and he took me back in the office. He showed me some charts, and I looked at all these chords and, oh, no, you know, what's a G-M-A-J-7, you know? Oh, no. So he gave me the music to take home, and he wanted me to come in and audition for the stage band. And I had a good guitar teacher at the time by the name of Rod. And Rich had studied with Don Wenzel, who was kind of the local legend of the time as a jazz guitarist. And poor Rich, he'd been trying to teach me this beautiful, you know, chord solo arrangement of Misty that Don Wenzel had put together. And, you know, it was like trying to get me to do that when I just wanted to learn 96 Tears, you know. It didn't reach to me, you know. I wasn't ready yet, I guess. I called my teacher, Rich, up. I said, Rich, that arrangement you're trying to show me on Misty, I need to be able to play it by Monday as part of my audition. So he was dumbfounded by that. I went in, and I was just all of a sudden, I was on fire to learn. Then he got me a jazz guitar chord book, you know, and I guess I just showed enough on that audition to make it either that, or my suspicion is that he was that desperate because he had never, the Southwest Stage Band had never had a guitar player in it. Guitar was kind of an optional instrument for a big band. It was, you know, you had to have a piano player, you had to have a drum and a bass player. Guitar was really, you know, not necessary. But he was desperate because the band was very good and had a shot at taking the state, you know, award, you know, and but he had no piano player. The rhythm section was drums and bass. Nobody could play chords, you know, for the soloist, and so that's kind of, I think, what kind of led to me getting that opportunity. But that was life changing because all these guys in the band were, you know, experienced compared to me, and you know, got me, okay, you need to subscribe to Downbeat, okay, check. You know, you need to listen to this guy, check. You know, it was just the beginning of my you know, career in music, really.
You've been around the university circuit, University of Utah after high school, and then you went to the University of Miami, and you've taught, and you played with so many people over your career. You already, you know, Karrin Allyson, Marilyn Maye, Jay McShann, Claude Williams. There's a lot of people that you played with. What have you learned through your education and playing with these veterans that have helped you teach? What have they given you?
Oh, that's two-sided. I mean, you've got, first off, the teaching experience, which is, you know, to me, I always feel like teaching is, you know, I'm teaching myself when I'm teaching somebody, because when you have to verbalize something or you need to explain, you need to come up with a concept, it's sort of like you're kind of inspiring yourself, or you're teaching yourself. So I've learned a lot from my students. I've learned a lot from just the process of teaching, and it's really invaluable. And of course, the better the student, the more inspired you are, and the more you get from it, of course. But as I mentioned, the first really important teacher was John Elliott, who taught jazz theory and jazz piano, and everybody took with John. He was kind of known as the jazz guru of the Midwest. And Pat Metheny studied with him, Danny, everybody of that time period. And so John was incredible at getting you to be able to think songs in all 12 keys, which, of course, that became real valuable for me later on, because you're working with vocalists and they're never singing it in the keys that you're used to, So John was a huge influence on all of us. Speaking of Claude Williams and Jay McShann, I mean, that was the one of the highlights of my life, was be able to play and do some traveling with them, and I mean, they were living Kansas City jazz history. It was like not just reading about them in a book or listening to them on a record, but interacting with them and playing a gig with them was just totally amazing. It felt like you were getting that lineage, you were getting it firsthand. And I should mention too, even in the country club years in the 80s, Kansas City's version of those gigs was so much better than when I was going to school in Miami. There wasn't a lick of jazz to be found on those typical country club gigs in that part of the world, but in Kansas City, because I think we had that history of Jay McShann, and many of the people that I played for in those country clubs had grown up listening to Kansas City jazz. So there was a scene in Kansas City that was different than other cities, even in the private country club world. And so I played those gigs, and even though I wasn't, officially playing a jazz gig, my God, the band would be, Carmel Jones on trumpet, Herman Bell on saxophone. Herman did a lot of traveling with Clark Terry. Of course, Carmel was with Horace Silver's band on Song for My Father, and legendary jazz trumpet player that wound up coming back to Kansas City. So even in those settings, I felt like I was learning something, and experiencing Kansas City jazz firsthand. Yeah, I can't say enough about that, because the energy that Claude brought to a performance was just like, okay, that's another level there. That's another gear. I'm still looking for that gear.
Up to this point, you've left Kansas City, you've come back, you're a staple on the scene. What do you like best about Kansas City?
Well, like I say, from experiencing those kind of gigs in Miami, and that kind of mentality that, there's no hint of jazz. It just, I felt like, okay, there's something about Kansas City that, even though, the 1930s are well past us, the real glory years of, Boss Tom and Count Basie being a local band, and those days are gone, but it's still there. It's like the influence that it's had has been felt for decades, So I think Kansas City is a very strong jazz town, and it's had ups and downs. Some periods weren't so strong, but I'd say it's with what's going on right now with the Green Lady Lounge, and jazz 7 nights a week at Chaz at the Raphael Hotel, and the Majestic Steakhouse. There's so much live music going on here right now that if I hear about a young player that's thinking about leaving, I think to myself, well, why? You've got it pretty good here. It's an easy city to live in. To commute and drive, get around town is usually I leave about 45 minutes before gig time. It's not a problem. So that, and the history, the club scene we have. I think one of the best things that happened was when UMKC brought in Bobby Watson to head up the jazz program.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would say, "Oh no, that's going to be the worst thing that can happen because you're going to have all these young jazz players and they're going to want to play just like I work for $5. They're going to want to play somewhere. The scene is going to get killed." And actually, the opposite has happened. The young players have brought in a lot of vibrancy and life to everything, and the game is changing, in my opinion. There was a time when, if you could play, if you were like a Pat Metheny or Danny Embry, Rob Whitsitt, you had to get out of town. It was time for you to go, and because Kansas City was you're not going to grow, you're not going to get opportunities, and that was the case. But I just don't think that's true anymore. I think the world has shrunk, and the social media, Facebook and YouTube has, Herman Mahari. He's a Kansas City guy. He's still a Kansas City guy, but he's going around the world and playing in Paris and Europe, and he's being able to do something and, live a lot cheaper, live in a nice city. In my opinion, that's great. Yeah. Go to New York and scuffle like crazy and pay way too much money to live. Yeah, but I think these opportunities are now presenting themselves, and you don't have to live in New York. You don't have to live in L.A. And if a young guy says, I'm going to move to New York, why? Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
Herman goes to play. He plays New York a lot. And, Marilyn lives in Kansas City, but she's in New York more than Kansas City. She's there all the time performing. So I don't know, but that's my opinion. That we've just got this incredible scene here, and it's doing very well. And so I'm very proud of the city. I'm very proud of the heritage we have.
Right on. Let me ask you this: as you reflect on your career right now, you're still as busy as ever. You've had a lot happen. Do you feel good about your career?
I do. I feel like it's exactly what I wanted to do. I've been able to, travel the world and, perform with some great musicians from all over. Work with incredible performers. It's just it's kind of what I'm born to do, and what I feel like I'm best at doing is being a sideman. I think I have no qualms about that my specialty has been able to go in and work with people and hopefully make them sound better, hopefully bring some positive stuff to the gig. And that's why I think I've always enjoyed working with vocalists. I don't have to be center stage, but I love that role, and of being a sideman. And some people are born to be leaders, and some people are born to be supporters, and that's kind of. So I really feel like I've done what I want to do. Yeah.
You've been a part of a lot of performances that a lot of people have remembered. They've been in the audience. They've seen you up there on stage. What performances, jazz specifically, have you seen that have made a really huge impression on you? Live jazz performances.
The legends, seeing the legends play, and getting to work with Clark Terry. Hearing the Basie band when Count Basie was still alive, come and play in Kansas City. Incredible. Seeing Freddie Green play. I gotta say, there's so many. I mean, seeing Jim Hall, play, and actually, I got to see Wes Montgomery play before he passed away. He came to Kansas City and he played at the Kansas City Jazz Festival, and that was Wes was one of my very first, jazz guitar heroes that I really gravitated to him so much. But yeah, I mean, there's, I've been a huge Pat Metheny fan. I've seen Pat play in a variety of settings with the trios and then the Pat Metheny group, and it's been fun to to watch his career. I think the first time I heard him, he was 15 years old, doing a trio gig at a restaurant, and so being able to watch his career from the very beginning has been a highlight for me. Seeing John Schofield live, he's one of my favorite guitar players too. And just saw Steve Karnas play, came through town and played at the Black Dolphin, and he's just an amazing guy. Yeah, I'd say that's some of the highlights of people that I've seen and followed closely, and then of course, aforementioned working with Jay McShann and Claude, just true Kansas City jazz, true legends of our town.
Absolutely. So let me ask you quite simply, why do you love jazz?
That's, I don't know. It's pretty hard to say. I think that day I heard the Southwest High School stage band play. It was love at first sound. It was just it connected with me. It resonated with me. It's the freedom, the freedom of expression, to be able to improvise. I was really scared to death of it when I started because I had no idea how they do that. But I love the spontaneity of it and the freedom. And my dad loved jazz. Although my parents got divorced when I was pretty young, I still have memories of my dad playing jazz records, and he played a little bit of boogie-woogie piano. And especially I'd have a night where, he'd have custody night or whatever. Oftentimes, it was to go with him. He was a lifelong barbershop singer. And so I'd go to the rehearsals and, sing with the barbershop chorus, men's chorus. So I think my love of harmony kind of came from him. We'd be in there singing and, they'd hit a chord and really be on with the intonation, and my dad would hear some overtone on the ceiling in the corner of the room we were in, and he'd say, "Do you hear that? Do you hear that? You hear that note up there?" And he'd switch his arm and he'd say, "Bumps," talk about goosebumps. So I think I got the love of harmony from my dad, and of course jazz. It's a combination of these glorious rhythms and incredible harmonies, and you can't point to one thing. For me, I can't point to one thing, but it's a combination of all those elements of surprise. Yeah, surprise whether it's the way it's phrased, the rhythm is phrased, or it's surprise in terms of like, oh, you reharmonized that. Well, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, it's incredible.
What's the future look like for you? Is it business as usual? Are there recordings? Anything coming up? What do you see your life unfolding jazz-wise here in, say, the next year, the next coming years?
I'm not sure. I'm sort of open to the possibilities. I would love to. I sure love to work with Deborah Brown more. I think she's, one of the most incredible vocalists. It's great working too. I just was on Karrin Allyson's latest recording. Did a recording back in December. Hasn't been released yet, but I'm excited about that. And it's all original music, so it's a new thing for Karrin to do that kind of project. And so I'm hoping that to get to do some more traveling with her. And she's incredible. She's just, like I say, I've just been able to work with the best. So I just want to keep doing that. I hope Marilyn keeps rolling right past 100. Keeps doing what she's doing. So I think it's just, for me, it's just more of the same. Just continuing the variety and the stuff I'm doing. Just more of the same. I do think that the business has changed remarkably, and I think it's sometimes hard when you come up in that whole era of like, okay, so you make a record and people buy it, and then then you get some more money and you make another record and people buy it. And it's so different now, with artists, that I think the newer artists, especially they're so connected to social media and YouTube that rather than discouraging, so to speak, giving the music away, I think they've used YouTube to build their career, and that's what I noticed, the big change that's occurring. Do you know who Jacob Collier is?
Yeah.
He to me, like, that, there's the poster child for the way things are now, and that well, once again, you learn from your students. One of my students at BMKC, we were doing a lesson, and he pulled up Jacob Collier on his phone, and I think he was maybe 17 at the time, and did some really wild arrangement of a song with, doing all the vocal parts and playing incredible piano, playing incredible bass. Like, who is this guy? How can anybody have this much talent? And he just rolled those things out routinely. You couldn't wait to put another posting on, and so he went, virtually from doing that for about 3 years, 3 or 4 years, to now he just went straight from basically his parents' house and posting his YouTube to touring the world. None of the usual, business as usual, like Karrin Allyson moves to Kansas City, she pays her dues and works in the Phoenix, nightclub, and, she pays her dues and scratches and claws, like what we had to do. And it's different now. I mean, it's like YouTube is just, social media just changed the whole course. Yeah. It's amazing. To me, it's absolutely stunning that, so I think that's to me, getting more of a YouTube presence would be good for me. I'd like to do that. I'd like to develop that. I'd like to maybe develop some online teaching, so people that know me know that I'm a little technology impaired when it comes to a lot of that stuff, but that's one area that I think is just, it's so important nowadays.
I'm going to save the hardest one for last for you, and I'm going to ask you this. Everyone has a version of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but when you wake up, who's Rod? Who are you? What's your perception of who you are?
Well, it's kind of a tough one. That is tough. Take that one. Well, I love people. I love interacting with people. I love playing music, and it's all kind of, to me, it's all kind of about the same thing. It's whether you're having a conversation with somebody at Trader Joe's or you're playing on a bandstand, either way it's a conversation, And so I say I just enjoy that, Other than that, I really don't know.
That's cool. That's a good answer right there. I think that kind of wraps everything up for what I wanted to talk to you about. Rod, thank you for the music. Thank you for the live performances, giving me some of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yo, you bet, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Kansas City and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Rod for his his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.